One of the things I'm curious about, because I'm a big fan, I'm 60 years old, and I grew up in an era where American comedy was a very important thing. Directors like Billy Wilder, who could be savagely satirical about American society. I mean, Ace in the Hole is one of the most corrosively funny films I think it's ever been made. And it's a dark film then and now. It hasn't changed one bit. I grew up with those kind of films, and I'm not surprised or shocked by them. I welcome you and Alexander Payne are in different parts of the forest, but you're both willing to take on serious issues comedically and not worry about whether people get it or don't get it. It's up to them in a certain sense. Only you and Alexander Payne, to my knowledge, have so far made a film that in any way dealt with abortion. Even though the films were not, neither Citizen Roof nor Palindromes is about abortion, and yet you both make it as a central plot device and metaphor in the film. Discuss desiring to do that.
Well, we live in a peculiar country. It's really the only place in the world where abortionists are assassinated and clinics are bombed. Where to be an abortionist, like to be a policeman or a fireman, is to take on a heroic profession. Certainly one can make a good living as a doctor without having to perform these procedures. So it's hard not to be responsive in some sense to this reality. When Eric Rudolph, I think, was captured a few years ago, who had bombed a few clinics. I remember reading about how the townspeople, his community, rallied around him. They're very sympathetic to his plight. And I read a bit about what he's had to say. And the thing that, the truth that struck home to me was how everyone, deep down inside, it's a profound human truth that we need to believe that we are basically good. Now, I'm not out to dispute that, but so much as to explore more fully the moral dimension of all of this. Everyone thinks he's fighting the good fight. The man who murders the abortionist thinks he's saving 1 million unborn babies. Stalin, on his deathbed, thought he was basically a good person. I mean, narcissism and self-deception, these are survival mechanisms without which many of us might not still be here. I think all of this filters into what I do. Certainly, you know, when you go to the movies in general, you are asked to identify with an attractive protagonist who may say or do the right thing and behave perhaps even heroically in the end, so that having made this identification, you feel much better about yourself. You have a wonderful narcissistic kind of high. Now, when you go to one of my movies, however, you're not going to get that narcissistic high. My movies function in a different way, with different aims. They are more interested in exploring our failures, our profound flaws that shape our lives. And for many this can be discomforting, but for others it can provide a kind of release, because I think movies, in some ways, at their best, I think they can function as ways of articulating human experience in ways that it is very difficult to articulate with even our most intimates.
One of the interesting things I noticed when I was reading the cast list, actually, I really looked at it more carefully because I was looking for all the different women who play Aviva. And I see Huckleberry Aviva, Mama Sunshine Aviva, and I finally, you get more of it. It's funny how you get more on the cast list. You kind of see a little bit more of what you're getting at, that these are not exactly the same character these people are playing, but you give us, you do give us more clues as to what you're about when you actually read the characters.
Not sure what you're getting at there, but I describe each in order to make them identifiable in the cast list. I had to basically put the intertitle card title attached to that Aviva. So for those purposes, I refer to them in this way, so that you can distinguish, if you're looking through the cast list, which played which part. But for me, it is very much, it is one character played by many different performers. There are 8, it could have been 18 or 80 for that matter. In a sense, any one of us in the audience could play an episode in this young girl's life. It is, of course, a way of getting at the universality experience, just as the common convention of one performer, one character is a way of particularizing an experience to get at its universality. It's just going at it, I suppose, from the other end of the lens of the telescope.
One of the places in the film, and I've only seen it once, where I was actually taken aback and I didn't really know what was happening for a brief moment, was when Mama Sunshine Aviva, played by Sharon Wilkins, is introduced, along with the boy Alexander Brickle's Peter Paul. She's laying on the back of a river. At first I think she may be dead. She's wearing a costume that doesn't exactly fit her, and this young boy is approaching her. And I say, where are we? I mean, anything can happen here. I'm not sure what is about to happen.
Well, it only made sense. It was the same outfit that the previous performers had been wearing. There is continuity here. It's the same character, so she would be wearing the same outfit. There is a kind of fairy tale-like, storybook, fable-like aspect to this movie. And for me, Sharon Wilkins was very much the Gulliver, the Gulliver surrounded by the Lilliputians there. There are references to, of course, Night of the Hunter and Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, and so forth. But in the way Gulliver's, in a sense, washed ashore there. And at the end, you see Jennifer, when it's Jennifer Jason Leigh, I mean, you see it's a woman of a certain age. And you see that face, it's a life that's been lived. I should stop for a second, just so
At least it's not a cell phone. Continue.
I was, oh yes, about Jennifer. When you look at Jennifer Jason Leigh, she's a woman of a certain age, and you see that face, it's a face that's lived a life, that you see a kind of sorrow etched in those features, as if this character, who had been away, we don't know how long, maybe a week, maybe a month, we don't know, but as if she had lived a whole life, emotionally, having been through so many tribulations and sorrows and so forth, and yet, of course, she's still just 13 years old.
One quick question. Is Tyler Menard's Jiminy intended to be a gay character?
Yes. His disability, in fact, was his gayness. That is unspoken, but I took this leap of faith that a certain amount of people would pick up on that.
Well, he stands out because he's radiantly beautiful, and also his background as an actor. And when you reconstruct it afterwards, you think to yourself, it pretty much has to be that. But I liked it. It was a very witty. I thought it was a very witty device.
Well, I gave him, I suppose, everything but the limp wrist. He played himself up a little bit, and this, you know, added a little swish, so to speak. In fact, gave me the idea when he came in. I didn't imagine a person that was gay there initially, but when he came into the audition, a light went off, and I just loved the idea of bringing him into the Sunshine Singer group.
Also, he has real performing ability, so he adds a certain charisma to the Sunshine group.
Oh, charisma and professionalism, yes, and in fact, he's on a Broadway show or off-Broadway show now, a musical called Altar Boys with a Z. It's not so far removed thematically, in fact, from the kind of character he plays here.
Alexander Brickell's character, Peter Paul, is very good too. It is another. We're increasingly in all films. We're seeing these really. Miranda July has a couple of very young performers in her, Me, You, and Everyone We Know, who are like a 6-year-old kid who works on the internet and is an amazing presence, like an adult presence. These young performers who can carry off adult-like scenes with adult-like dialogue are quite incredible. Where did you find this boy who's very good?
Well, he just came in and auditioned, and I liked him. It was evident he was very smart. But about the dialogue, though, it is very much true to the child, to the character. I don't want to make a child sound like an adult. A child is a child. Certain children are more sophisticated, than others, but they are still always children. This particular actor. Was very precocious. I think he was 9, maybe 10, and was very familiar with all my movies. He told me Happiness was his favorite.
One is also struck by Ellen Barkin's speech to one of the Avivas, her anti-abortion speech or her liberal speech or whatever, how one would characterize it. It's a great speech. It's in some ways as memorable as Bill Maplewood's speech, and yet of a very different character, but it stands out and the audience will hush and actually listen to what she's saying, as they did with him.
Well, Ellen it was so remarkable and so giving and generous with this film, and she was so happy to take on this character. It certainly was not a vanity piece. It's an acting piece, and she was happy to have this kind of material to dig into. Some people may find her to be a terrible mother. Others will find her to be a sensible one. But regardless. It is a complicated situation here. I mean, I think she's a good woman, this character. If you gave her the form, she would check off the box, pro gun control, pro gay rights, anti-war, etc. But then reality intrudes, and she's everything is topsy-turvy, and she's thrust into this terrible dilemma. What do you do when your 13-year-old daughter comes home and she's pregnant, and not only pregnant, but she wants to keep the baby? It's an impossible dilemma, and really a kind of lose-lose proposition for many. But it throws into relief her moral fiber. It becomes a kind of crucible. And at the end of the film, when she says, "Am I a terrible mother?" what she's doing is she's acknowledging her failure to come through in the appropriate way at the critical moments. And I think therein lies her dignity. But it's this sense that she is, her character is in some sense is so emblematic of what the film is getting at, that it's easy enough to take one's position on these matters, but it's another thing to examine more fully the moral dimension of what all of this means.
What seems to characterize all your films, the 4 I've seen, is a sense of humor. That humor comes through at all times, and sometimes in very expected places, sometimes very improbable. I think when Joe, the truck driver, runs out of the motel where he and Viv have had sex, he has a line, "I'm going off to get some zip discs." The audience breaks up. There's something about zip discs. It's almost like a Woody Allen character saying Buick, that just catches us off guard, and it isn't not what the film is about, but it's a little funny pit stop that's something going, wow.
Well, the movies, I always called them, if I had to characterize them, I always called them sad comedies, and I think this one perhaps the saddest of all my comedies. It's hard to separate the humor from the pathos. They are so inextricably connected, one emerging from the other, vice versa. It's not like I throw in a joke or I throw in a moment of melodrama. It is all of a piece. When, for example, the Sunshine Singers are first seen around the breakfast table, and Aviva sees them, there's, for all the frivolity and satire that takes place, there is an underlying pathos, that the knowing that any one of these children could have been hers, that as her mother said, your child might be blind or brain damaged or missing a limb, etc. And there they are, all surrounding her. And so it's a kind of gravity that weighs beneath the surface frivolity. And it rubs up against each other, creates a kind of friction, so that sometimes the audience may say, should I laugh, should I not laugh? If I'm laughing, what am I laughing at? Again, for example, when the Sunshine Singers are performing their musical numbers, and they take such great pride and joy in their performances, such profound delight. I was very moved by that, and yet at the same time I step back and I say, oh my God, what are they singing? And it's this friction of the two rubbing up against each other that I think is so emblematic of the dynamic in which my movies operate. Do you want me to hold?
No, I think it's better because you get less mic noise. Okay. It's hard on my arm, but no, exactly. I thank you for the thought, though. You talk about friction, things rubbing up against each other. It's always occurred to me that that's the basis of sexual attraction, too. That we're attracted to people who have conflicting qualities, and whatever attracts us, obviously that's individual, but a certain gorgeous physicality with a weird depressive personality. Two things can rub up against each other and be extraordinarily attractive to somebody. I think Woody Allen explores that in some of his comedies, where Charlotte Rampling's character in one of his films is beautiful, depressive, and he's insanely attracted to her, and it's partly because of both elements that rub up against each other in a creative kind of way. And I think the humor and as well as the odd sexual charges in your film sometimes come from precisely that.
You're very good at this. I'm not so self-analytical as you might think, but it is unpredictable, certainly, the charge when it comes to sexual matters, how that exactly operates. But it's a mystery, and perhaps all the best for the fact that it is a mystery.
Before we go on to a couple of the other films that I want to talk about, I think the most difficult scene probably is when one of the Aviva characters is with Joe as he's about to kill the abortion doctor. And this is something I probably nobody in the audience can not feel morally, real moral dilemmas, no matter who they're rooting for or what their position on abortion is. This is a real dilemma.
Well, I wanted to, it was a scene that I thought of right from the get-go, of imagining a character, a girl that you would have great sympathy for, that your heart goes out to her. She's been through great sorrows and pain, and you feel all this great identification and feeling for her, and yet at the same moment, as there she is abetting this terrible, terrible crime, and you say, you shudder in revulsion, no, and horror, no, no, no. She's saying, do it, do it, do it. It's kind of an echo of what we heard earlier. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And that this, again, this, how our heart may go one place, and yet at the same time we have this terrible but very marked, pronounced lie that makes us just want to scream and at the same time and protest against the kinds of actions that such people may find themselves committing.
One of your most memorable characters, and you even refer to him in your director's statement on Palindromes, Bill Maplewood, played by Dylan Baker, the pedophile psychiatrist in Happiness. And one of the things I was struck by is that since I'm a gay activist who's been doing sexual liberation reporting for a long time, that you were accurate in the use of the term pedophile. So many people refer to that as having relationships with teenagers, which it means prepubescent boys and girls.
Well, yes, it's a good point. You're the first one to bring this up. It's very radical of you. I appreciate it because we live in times of hysteria, and it's very hard to talk about these things without people suddenly getting all upset and irrational. It's certainly this way in the U.S., Western Europe, U.K., Australia. And of course, these taboos shift in their meaning as you go into other cultures. I was in Tokyo recently, and there a 13-year-old middle-class girl will very commonly take an after-school job as a paid escort for adult men, and society is not. I'm sorry, one second.
About 5 more minutes if you get.
No, we can't go over that much, David.
3?
All right.
Okay, good.
Now I'm not out to endorse or advocate, but I'm just pointing out how the meaning of these things these taboos do shift from culture to culture. In this movie, where I tried to flip things, in fact, so that in fact the young girl is the predator who wants to get pregnant from him, and then he is the prey, in some sense, that she's after him, that she falls in love with him. She says at the end, because of course in this world, even if one could technically say he's not a pedophile, of course, because she is certainly not a child, still. She's 13 years old, so virtually it doesn't matter. That virtually it's the same thing as far as the way society will perceive this. When she knows that Mark Weiner is falsely accused of this crime, and she says because pedophiles love children. When she says this, now when I wrote this, I remember, oh my God, it was an advertisement for Lamble. I was very, what did I put down? But I put it there because it was truthful to the reality that had set up, to filter through her consciousness. This is where she in fact did find love, and that this was so unsettling for people, that for her this was truthful. Now there is no sordidness for her, and this, as I say, is what is very unsettling. Oh shoot, I was going to say something.
Anyway,
I lost my thread.
a couple of other points. There's a scene in Storytelling where the Scooby character, played by Mark Webber, is receiving a blowjob from a young fellow high school student of his. And what occurred to me is I identified with the young kid who's about to give the blowjob, and he said, I'm very attracted to you. And Scooby goes into this mantra, I know, we all know. And the notion that your most private secret about being a gay teenager is blatant. It's like on a billboard all over town.
Well, we reveal ourselves always in ways we're not conscious of. It's so much before you even open your mouth. You give yourself away so much of the time, and children are very smart and read each other and so well. With such acuity, so it's so that it had a kind of logic for me that he could be in fact very unaware of the effect that he gives off to the world around him.
If Heather Mazzarow had been willing to do a sequel to Welcome to the Dollhouse, would this film have been very different?
No, this film would not have been very different, but she would have been in it. Even with a funeral, she would have been in it.
Also, your earliest film, Fear and Anxiety, which I guess you don't consider a success, what did you learn from that?
Well, I'm glad that's, the title is not even a title that I wanted, so it's painful for me to even to really talk about it. But what can I say is that it's a painful experience that sits lodged in the back of my mind. That's always there. I don't think about it. I don't dwell on it. But what you learn from any of these movies, it is in some sense a process of both discovery and self-discovery, and over the course of time, you absorb in a certain kind of understanding. But I couldn't articulate it in any sort of list of lessons 1 through 10.
And finally, I know somebody who is like the Robert Wisdom character in storytelling, a very, very acerbic and opinionated creative writing teacher who's coming from a very dark and strong place. No allusions to race. That's an amazing character.
Well, thank you. I hope he enjoyed the film. I was very proud of what I achieved particularly in that story there, I'm even proud of the big red box. You know, it's the only country in the world you get to see it, and I'm the first. I can take pride in having made the first studio movie with a big red box in the middle of it. Certainly, it's not what the studio had wanted.
And finally, what Mark Webber does as Scooby, I think, is a very brilliant, understated performance. He's a young actor who's really good. And that Scooby character is a really kind of definitive commentary on teenage America and the obsession over adolescence right now.
Well, yes, he's a character who's suffused with pop culture, the white noise of pop culture, so to speak. He lives and breathes the MTV, which, MTV is kind of brilliant the way they have co-opted the whole idea of subversion and transformed it into a commodity. It's brilliant. But this young man who by being exposed by this documentary for in a sense who he is, that the hollowness, the vanity, the emptiness of his ambitions and dreams, while as painful as that may have been, he won't ever be quite the same. He can finally begin to grow up.
Thanks a lot.